Many of us are going to downsize, relocate, and right size our primary dwelling in second half of life. And this is a huge decision because if we're going to do this, we want to do it right. So today we're going to break it down into some bite-sized pieces of the why, who, what, when, and where, and see if we can manage to make a good decision on this momentous move. Welcome to this further journey where we talk about all kinds of issues that are presented to us in second half of life. My name is Jeanette Slater, and I actually think I'm pretty well qualified to talk about this topic because I have moved a lot throughout my life, including in second half of life. My family were missionaries, and so I moved across the ocean 7 times before I was 16 years old. So that was not only a physical relocation, but a cultural relocation. And since then, I've also moved probably about 11 times, including, some rentals. And so I've been through this journey. In fact, in second half of life, I've moved 3 times. The first time was upsizing, and the next 2 were downsizing. So let's talk about this journey and how we can make it more manageable. I was also a realtor, so I helped people make these kinds of moves and make these kinds of decisions. But in second half of life, this can be a bigger decision in a lot of ways, and the reasons we make those moves are very different than why we made those moves in the first half of life. Let's begin by talking about why we make the move. Well, in first half of life, there are 2 primary reasons why people make a move. One is because their family is growing and they need a larger space. So sometimes it's moving in the same town, but into a larger house. And then the other primary reason that people move in first half of life is because of a job. So they're moving to a location where they're already set up, at least one of the spouses is already set up to have a job, and that becomes their primary reason for moving. The challenges in second half of life are kind of more complicated because the reasons we move are different and they have deep implications. For one thing, maybe you've lived in your home for many, many years and you've established roots, and maybe you raised your kids there, and the house itself has memories. And so the thought of moving away from that can be rather difficult. There are a lot of reasons why downsizing or right sizing in second half of life might be the right move for you. First of all, size. Maybe the kids have left home, it's just 2 of you or even 1 of you, and the idea of living in this huge house no longer fits you and your hoped for lifestyle in second half of life. Along with size is just managing a larger property. I know friends who decided to move into a condo because they didn't have the energy and the strength anymore to keep up a large property. So that was a primary reason for them to move. Another primary reason that I've seen people move is because of family, either to move closer to their extended family, brothers and sisters, or usually it's because their kids have moved out of town and they want to be close to their kids, especially when the grandkids come. And so they're willing to move often to a new city or town where they've never been before, but they're doing it in order to be close to their grandkids. And another reason people move is because of their health. That was a primary reason for us. We were done with the heat of the desert and our bodies just wouldn't adjust as well as they used to. We needed to get out of the desert. And so that was a primary motivation for us. Or some people want to move Maybe they live farther out of town and they want to move closer to town so they have access to health care. All these are reasons why, and it's important in this monumental move in second half of life, and I'm talking about moves to another primary home rather than a move into a retirement community. It's important that we know our why, because there's going to be some challenges along the way that we'll be talking about. And so having a firm reason that you know this is the right move for me, this is the right move for us, having that firmly in mind is really important. This is a change journey, as we've been talking about. And we change because either the present is too uncomfortable and we know it's time to make a change, or we have a good vision of the future and where we want to be and how we want our life to go. And so we go after that vision. So if you don't have one or the other or both, this might not be the time to move. But if you do, let's see how the rest of the move goes. Next question that comes up in the move is who? Now you think, oh, well, it's me and my spouse, or who else is there? Well, in second half of life, we are in a web of relationships, and tugging on one piece of that web is going to disturb the rest of the web. And it doesn't mean we don't move, but I think we will make our move more holy if we pay attention to the other people in our lives who this affects. So first of all, of course, is family. I know I have friends who would like to move, but their parents still need a lot of help. And so they are feeling sometimes a little bit stuck where they are, but they can't move because of family. As I've already said, our kids and grandkids can also be affected by that. And maybe they want you to move closer, and maybe they don't. So how you and where you move, that we'll be talking about, affects them as well. But I also think we should pay attention to our community, to our friends, and how it's going to affect them. When we moved from Arizona to Indiana, we tried to bring our community along in the decision. We didn't want to just drop in one day and say, hey, we're moving, though we've had friends that did that. And I felt honestly a little bit slighted. We weren't close enough for them to confide in us that this is a challenge that they were considering. But also, I think our friends can help us along the way. First of all, if they're objective, they can help ask some good, tough questions. My sister-in-law asked me, are you sure you're ready to give up the warmth of Arizona and come to the frozen north? Because I'd lived here before and I didn't do so well. So that was a serious question that I had to consider before we made the move. And honestly, that question kept me from moving for 2 or 3 years, but it was a good question. And also, friends can help us see a way to move. So one of our friends was moving to another state, a new city, and they had a cabin in the woods that wasn't in town, but it was in the vicinity. So they could go up there in the summer and just try it out and see how they felt about being closer to their kids and how that would work out. And we took that to heart. So rather than moving lock, stock, and barrel from Arizona to Indiana, we came up here for 2 summers. We actually bought a condo, and we had 2 summers here to try out the community and see where our connections were. I had lived here before, and so I actually had a lot of connections. My family lived here, but I had a lot of friends that I'd stayed connected with. But I didn't know if that connection would hold. I thought, well, maybe everybody has their relationship docs filled. And we found out after 2 summers that no, there was room for us. And that made it much more enticing to make the move. So I think friends and family, our community can really be a help in our process of decision. Another part of the decision is the when. Timing is everything, right? So when are you going to move? Well, one of the most critical factors is that if you are married or have a partner, that you're on the same page. And honestly, my husband and I were not on the same page. It took us a couple of years to make the decision. And I'm glad he was willing to wait for me to move my psyche around to where I felt really good about the move. He felt a much more sense of urgency to move that I didn't feel. I liked my warm winters in Arizona, but his health was really challenged by the heat in Arizona. And so he felt much more of an urgency to move than I did. But again, we waited until we were on the same page, and I think that was really important. You may want to consider the real estate market of where you're leaving and where you're arriving if you're in the market to buy a home. Our first move after we got married, we moved into a 2,100 square foot house. It was larger than our previous home, and it was in 2007. And if you know the real estate market, in 8, 9, 10, the market crashed. So we were not able to sell our previous home. Instead, we found renters for it. And even when we did sell that 2,100 square foot home, we just got out by the skin of our teeth. We didn't lose money, but only because I was a realtor and didn't have to pay realtor fees. So you might want to pay attention. And we were moving, when we moved here, we moved from a location that was more expensive to one that was less expensive. And that was part of our decision making too. Can we move someplace where we can afford it? So when we had to look at the real estate market. And in addition, we looked at the weather. I can tell you, nobody wants to move north in the middle of the winter, and nobody wants to move south in the middle of the summer. And so we waited until spring, and that gave me one more nice warm Arizona winter. And in the spring, I was ready to go, and we had great weather making the big move. One of the big questions is, where are you going to move? That again will depend on whether you're moving for health reasons, for family reasons, for social reasons, or just because that's what you want to do. So I have friends who bought a place down in Mexico because that's what they wanted to do. They didn't have friends or family there, though they made a lot of friends. She had some healthcare challenges that she had to come back to the States for regularly, but it was what they wanted to do, and so they did it. One of our primary reasons, as I said, was for health and for family, because in my late 60s, I was not ready to move to a place where I didn't know anybody, and I was starting from scratch. Believe it or not, I'm enough of an introvert that was not appealing to me at all. So we had to find a place weather-wise that would work for us and had the community that I needed. Even moving across town can change a lot of your social situations. If you're moving into a condo where you have people closer around, you may be making new friends in that association. So that too can be a change. On to the what. So there's two aspects of what. One is what are you going to move? So that means going through all your stuff. A whole nother video. We are not going to dive into that today. But there's also, what kind of house or abode do you want to move to? What kind of house you choose can really impact your second half of life. What's important to you? If you are a gardener and you really want to keep gardening, then you want a house where you have some garden space outside. If you want to travel, then maybe you're looking at a place like a townhouse or a condo where you don't have to deal with all the outside maintenance and upkeep, and you're free to lock the door and go on your travels. Are you looking for more of a standalone house, or are you looking for more of a townhouse or a condo? And when I was a realtor, I was helping an elderly lady find a place, and I just assumed she was in her 70s. And I said, don't you want to move into a condo or a townhouse where you don't have to worry about the outside? But for her, she said, oh no, I want a standalone house with a yard that I can mow, because she really still felt like she was very active, and being stuck in a condo just wasn't going to work for her. When we moved here, I wanted a little garden space, and I do have a square foot garden, but we wanted a yard because I wanted a dog. So that impacted what house we decided to buy. What house you purchase will also depend on your needs. For us, one of our criteria was that we wanted a single-story house that we could live on one floor if needed. And in our town, there honestly weren't a lot of those for sale. So it took us a while to find a house that really suited us. And one of my needs was also that I needed some good southern light in the winter. And most of the houses we looked at had garages on the south side with no southern light coming into the home. And that was a no-go for me. And of course, what you buy could depend on affordability. Now, as an aside, and this would be a whole nother video, if you're interested, let me know in the comments, and that would be using a reverse mortgage to purchase a home. And for some people, that's really good. We actually had a reverse mortgage on our previous home, and a friend of mine got a reverse mortgage to be able to upgrade her home as needed so she could stay in it longer. So I'm sure you've heard nightmare stories about reverse mortgages, but for the right person, it's actually a really good deal. The final decision we had to make was how. How are we going to make this move? Initially, my husband said, oh, we'll just rent a truck and we can fill it up ourselves and we can drive it across country. And I said, no, that's one step too far for us. Plus, even loading up the furniture and everything, that would be difficult for us. We could do it over time, but if we got a truck, we'd have to do that in one day. That was just not impossible. Plus, both this move and the one before it, we realized that while we were getting older and didn't want to be lifting heavy things, our friends were the same age as us. And so we couldn't put them through that. So the second to the last move that we made, we packed all the boxes ourselves, but then we hired a company to come in, load everything up, and unload everything in one day. And that worked out really well for that move. So when we were moving from Arizona to Indiana, we decided to go with the pods. So we had 3 big pods parked in our driveway, and we had them over a week or two so we could slowly figure out what would fit and how we were going to put them all together. And we did have friends who came and did a magnificent job of packing those 3 pods. They were packed tight. And then we called the company, said they could move them, and we drove off with our suitcases. We actually had another trailer behind our car for the last minute things that didn't fit. And we were able to drive and move to our new place, and we had a few things in there and wait for the pods to appear. And so that worked out really well for us. You can also use pods if you're moving and you aren't quite ready to be in your house. Maybe you haven't closed on your house yet. You can delay the delivery until you have possession of the house. So that's actually a very good option to consider in second half of life. Now, again, I did all the packing of the boxes because I wanted to kind of sort things as I was packing. But when we helped my husband's mom move, we went through all her stuff so she knew what she was taking and what she wasn't taking. And she hired a company to come in and pack all the boxes and load them up. They did that all in one day. It was phenomenal to watch. And then they delivered them to her new place. So that worked out really well for her. So how you're going to move is also another decision that can be a little different in second half of life. In second half of life can be really quite different than first half of life. You perhaps have more family that you have to consider. You're really framing your second half of life in part by where you decide to move in, what kind of home you decided to move in. So it will shape your second half of life. But potentially you're also making room for the future as you clean out your closets and let go of stuff, and as you perhaps move into a smaller home. You're making room for the new, for what advantages and opportunities come to you in second half of life. Evaluate what you need now versus what you needed in first half of life, and be honest about that evaluation. But there's also the aspect of your whole sense of self. And we do get tied to the homes that we live in, and they do shape us. So in moving to a new location, a new place, even in the same city, you may discover parts of yourself that you didn't even know about. So give yourself room for that in this move in second half of life. I hope that it's a good move. If you have other questions that I have not touched on, please put them in the comments below, and I'll see whether I make a whole new video about that or at least answer your questions, because this is all part of this further journey. So let's move on together.